Well, would you look at this? Chrono Trigger PS1 review by me. I finished a video game. I've actually finished a lot of video games this year, so fuck you and your condescending tone. But here we are to talk about a specific video game. A highly touted video game. Some may say one of the greatest games of all time. I'm sure a lot of people say the greatest game of all time. But we're here to talk about it because I've played through it for the first time fully in the last 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 months. I had played Chrono Trigger like the first 40 minutes. I think I saw Marl get zapped to a different time period, but I don't think I went through the portal. I think I left and then saved, and that was I don't know, that could have been 10 years ago. That could have been 7 or 8 years ago. I think I was still in high school. So it could have been 5 years ago, but probably a little bit more. Because at some point in high school, I bought, probably with birthday money, pretty cool, all of the Final Fantasy retro games on the PS1. So there's an anthology that has 1 and 2 on a disc. Then there's two disc sets that have Chrono Trigger and 4, and 5 and 6. First time 2 and 5 had ever been in the great English language, I'm pretty sure. 3 got skipped over, didn't come till the DS, and is now a pixel remaster. But I have played, I guess this is something we'll get into, my history with JRPGs outside of Pokemon is relatively limited. I've played Final Fantasy 1 and 2. I intended to play all the games I bought. I only ended up playing those 2. And then I did buy 3 on the DS, and then I think I started that once, and I was like, chibi, this sucks. And then I was just like, well, I'll have to force myself through it, then I can do the rest. And then recently I was just like, oh, I can just do Chrono Trigger out of order, that's fine. But now I'm probably just going to do 4 and 6 and go to 5 later. I don't know, we'll talk about what's next after this. But anyway, that's my little history with Chrono Trigger. I'm sure that's tantalizing for everybody. So I'm coming with fresh eyes. I did know some things about Chrono Trigger beforehand, though. I remember back in the day watching a Jeremy Johns YouTube review. Now, Jeremy Johns is a famous movie reviewer. He's kind of a funny, old school, kind of outdated guy as things happen now, though I think he's still trucking along. Or he sort of does jump cut 5-minute movie reviews about movies as they come out. And he had periodically done some games. I remember he had done Uncharted, and he had done The Last of Us, and I think he had done I nearly said Citizen Kane. But it's the game, Soul Reaver, that game. It's something Kane, Legacy of Kane, that's the one. I think he has a tattoo of Legacy of Kane on his bicep or something. I remember him doing that in an old video. Basically, I used to like Jeremy Johns a lot in 2014, back when we were loving Marvel movies and the such. And he had Final Fantasy VI review and a Chrono Trigger review. I remember being captured by Chrono Trigger. What a cool name! What a cool title image and all that stuff. It looks like an Akira Toriyama thing. I love Dragon Ball. This is crazy. And a spoiler that I thought was a massive spoiler that always stuck with me, and I almost put off trying to play Chrono Trigger to see if I would forget it, was that you meet a little kid, and that little kid ends up being the bad guy in the future, and that's a mind-blowing twist. Which is not really how it is in the game. Obviously, the character he was talking about was Magus. I was still surprised. I figured it out that Janus was Magus without connecting it to that old spoiler. And I kept waiting for that guy to show up eventually. And then I figured it out, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cute. I figured it out, so I wasn't really spoiled anyway. All I remember is thinking that he looked like Pilaf, and I remember thinking that that Jeremy Johns put an image of him in that review. I think that's all fake memories. That's just me confusing stuff that's in the review. That's also not that big of a twist. There aren't really big twists in Chrono Trigger, which we'll get into. But that was always funny because that always stuck with me. It was there's certain spoilers for things you can't forget, and that was kind of the chief example of one for me. And then it turned out not to really matter, so that's good, I guess. Anyway. What did we think about Chrono Trigger overall? This game is very charming. I like the combat a lot. I like the vibe. I like a lot of the ideas. It's a 4-star game, however, which in the end has left me quite disappointed. This is true. This is not going to be the most positive Chrono Trigger review you've ever heard. So I'm hoping it's just my fans watching this and not a bunch of outside Chrono Trigger fans coming in. I'll have to see how I title the video. I went into Chrono Trigger expecting it to be one of the best games ever, and I expected to like it quite a bit. With reputation, there's a few things, right? Sometimes there's like, people really like something, and I kind of can tell I'm not going to like it. I'm trying to think of an example here. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is coming to my head as an example of like, this is something I'm not really interested in. Avatar: The Last Airbender is probably a much better example where it's like, I don't really care for this. I'm sure if I watched it, it would be good, but I have really no interest in watching it. It doesn't stand out to me at all. I'm not drawn to the clips I've seen of it or the story beats I've heard from it, etc., etc. Chrono Trigger is not like that. I like the aesthetic a lot. I like JRPGs a lot. I like character-driven games a lot. I like old games a lot. I like playing on my PS1. Even though historically, I guess we should get this out of the way, the PS1 version of Chrono Trigger has been maligned a lot because it loads very slowly. Nothing else is different. Like, I didn't want to play the DS version because it's a different game. Well, there's added dungeons at the end, and there's some different things that looks different. You use the touchpad. You engage with combat slightly differently. I am weirdly obsessive with trying to have, like, the original experience. Like, I try to watch subbed anime over dubbed anime because I think it's more of an original experience. That's a little bit more nebulous, especially when you take into consider, like, eye direction and stuff like that. But with games, I do that. Even though you're like, well, you played PS1 versions of Final Fantasy 1 and 2, which are very different, in aesthetic especially, than the original NES versions. But, I'm a hypocrite sometimes. But it was important to me for Chrono Trigger, for whatever reason, that I was probably going to not play it, or, like, see if it ever came to Nintendo Online, or maybe try and get an SNES emulator to play the original version if the PS1 version was any different. But it turns out the PS1 version isn't different, besides the loading times suck. The loading times didn't impact me too much because I'm always listening to something while I'm playing games usually. So it's not like I'm there trying to beat my fucking self over the head with the controller because it's taking 3 or 4 seconds to load the menu up on a black screen. Because there's something playing, so I'm not that mad that nothing's happening. I will say the transitions into the battle is a big aesthetic difference. If you watch footage of the DS version or the original Super Nintendo version, the battles just start immediately in the thing. Whereas every battle in the PS1 version, it lags for like 1 or 2 seconds, maybe more. The music starts, but the characters don't do their battle animations to indicate that they're doing a battle. It's not smooth at all. It couldn't affect your like of the game. It definitely affects like the fluidity of the visuals. And Chrono Trigger's visuals are one of its most appealing aspects in a lot of ways, and how smooth and how good of a game it looks on the Super Nintendo. That kind of makes sense. It looks incredibly good for a Super Nintendo game. It probably looks a lot better than most PlayStation 2D JRPGs. Definitely looks better than all the 3D ones because they're all halfway hideous. I don't know, Suikoden 2, I've seen footage from that, looks pretty good. This probably looks better than Chrono Trigger most of the time. I guess that was a tangent into talking about the PS1 version. I don't think the reason why I don't love it is because I played the PS1 version, is basically what I'm getting at here. The game is very charming. The combat is probably the highlight to me, and I know it's not the grandest JRPG combat, but there is something, and the active battle system thing is a big part of this. Now, I thought Chrono Trigger invented the active battle system, but apparently it was Final Fantasy IV, so that's crazy. I've been watching a bunch of YouTube videos about a bunch of things. Final Fantasy related, just JRPG in general related, very specifically Chrono Trigger related. Everyone's Chrono Trigger videos are borderline terrible. This is probably the case for every piece of media, but all the big ones just say the exact same things over and over again. It's really annoying and dumb. I watched the one dude that always makes the videos that have, they get a lot of views. He's Max Durant or something, and he has the best thumbnails. Like that one, I haven't even watched it, but the Metal Gear, his most popular video or whatever, that just has the Metal Gear Kodak thing, and it's the most profound moment in gaming history. What a great, genius. His videos always suck whenever I watch them, though. They're always terrible. They're always mundane and boring and like objectively toned, and I don't like him at all. I think so. I watched his Chrono Trigger video about existentialism, completely boring. Said nothing interesting about the game. Like I watched the Pro Jared review, and he just recaps the game. There's a much longer review. Oh, I like this YouTuber named Liam Triforce. I watched his Tunic video one time, and I thought it was great. And then I think I watched his like DS retrospective where he sort of goes through the DS in like 40 minutes and all the great games on it. I was like, oh, this is a cool idea. I watched his Chrono Trigger video. Absolutely terrible. Like, an absolutely terrible video. He talks about how he doesn't like JRPGs, but now he likes them. It's like the old thing that Digibro used to make fun of people that would make mech videos, would say, now, mechs usually suck, but Evangelion, that's a good show. And then that would be like the first 3 minutes of the video. He did that for JRPGs, and then he just recapped the story. And, like, a lot of things, like, basically, Chrono Trigger didn't connect with me very much. In these big story moments and in the characters, really. And I'm basically going to these videos, I'm like, can somebody explain to me what, like, the appeal is to them or whatever? And nobody does it. They just, like, say, and this moment's really cool when you get to it. And this moment's really, and it's like, okay, well, this doesn't help me at all. This doesn't, like, it's, like, self-obvious that this game is great, apparently. Even if you don't really think so. Though 4 stars isn't bad. I don't know how I jumped to that. I'm pretty sure I was talking about the combat. Active battle systems, then I got into Final Fantasy IV, of course. It's great. Obviously, Final Fantasy 1 and 2 didn't have that, and you just wait your turn, and in Pokemon, you just wait your turn, unless you're playing the new ZA game that's going to come out, I guess, and kind of Legends Arceus. Basically, you click attack, then you select the enemy you want to attack, then they attack, and then once all your enemies attack, the enemy attacks. That's how Pokemon works, that's how... well, in Pokemon, you have speed stats to determine who goes first. In Final Fantasy 1 and 2, I don't remember how you determine who goes first. I think you just always go first. It's good. There is and I kind of ruined this because about 3/4 of the way through the game, I realized you could pause in battles. I also know there's an option in the menu where you can have, like, when you're scrolling through the menu, like, it doesn't continue to be active. Like, the timing doesn't continue to happen. That sucks. The best part is that the pressure's on when you're scrolling through the menu, and the menu gets long when you get into text later in the game. You're like, oh, fuck, I went past it. Wait, no, cure's back up there. And you're like freaking the fuck out. And it's like a very big, like, I have to make sure that this is healed and we can hit this, and this is the opportunity to hit this before the others regenerate. That is a great adrenaline rush of that. And it is probably the thing I like the most about the game. I think it happened most in the Magus fight. I think in the part 1 of the Zeal fight, I'm thinking of Zeal as the location. I can't remember if it's the location and the mother's name. I think it is. But the Giga whatever it's called, the big purple-looking weird thing, I remember that battle being really good. And obviously Lavos is really good. I remember the actual battle with the Zeal mother character wasn't as dramatic or whatever. Lavos part 1 sucks, where you're just repeating all the bosses. It doesn't suck. That's like a cute callback, and it flashes to them. And if you weren't using a guide, which I was... it would probably be fun to try and figure out or remember how it goes. But the next 2 were really good. The cell form and then the alien form. Basically, these pieces of... I don't know, JRPGs are resource management games, right? And, like, when you're going through a dungeon, you're like... I got to the end, and I was in the Black Omen, and working my way through, and then getting to Lavos, and I was like... I only had, like, 5 shelters left. And it was, like, fun to try and figure out if I should try and push on a little bit and risk dying and having to reset the whole dungeon, or, like, I should use a shelter at this save point. And then you beat the boss, and it's like, should I go back and use another heal at the save point? Or should I try and use, like, my MP? I have a lot of elixir right now. And that's, like, a fun little game. And then in the battles, it's like, do I want to risk it by having everybody attack, even Marl to attack the fucking thing, because I know it only has so much HP left, and it's going to regenerate soon? Or do I keep her healing everybody, and then do slower damage and stuff like that? And, like, these decisions you have to make very quickly. I know, I like the combat a lot. I know to a lot of people, like, this has been in the discourse recently with Expedition 33, or 66. What the fuck is that video game called? Claire Obscure Expedition 33, I think. I don't know. Turn-based combat has been, like, in the discourse a lot recently about whether or not it's like completely outdated and stupid or great. I've never had a problem with it. I'm a Pokemon kid, obviously. Like, like 30 to 40% of my gaming in my entire life has been Pokemon. So obviously, I really love turn-based battling. It like has always been good to me. And I have no problem going back to these games. So I'm always like, that's good. Obviously, like Video Game Donkey is a pretty outstanding critic of saying that like turn-based shit is just inherently boring and terrible. The active stuff, I've never played an active style one, so this is really cool. I'm interested to see how it's implemented in the older games that I'm probably going to go back and play now, which is Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy VI. I played like 6 or 7 hours of Final Fantasy VII like 10 years ago too. I feel like that was turn-based though, and it didn't have an active thing. Or maybe it also gives you the option there whether or not you want to do it. It adds a lot, and I didn't think I would like it. I thought I would like... Because I remember back in the day when I played that first like 40 minutes of Chrono Trigger or whatever, I think I just did set it to like turn-based because I was like, active, that's like not even an RPG, that's stupid. And this time, because I think I googled and people basically said the active battle was like the default thing, so I was like, well, I want to do the default. So anyway, combat was very good. I like the vibe. I don't know, the different aesthetics of the different time periods, the way you move about the map and inside the areas in the game, that's all really good. The way you move around dungeons and it not being like sprite based. And basically, I talked about this in one of my scripted Pokemon videos recently about how the overworld is usually like a representative of something, like your little character and interacting with these buildings, and it's all like abstracted. Chrono Trigger is like, besides the open world map, like the actual large map you traverse, whenever you're in an area or a dungeon, none of it is representative. It is all literally there. And I think that was probably the biggest selling point of the game at the time. And it's interesting. It is a good commitment to it. It does make it seem smooth and more real. It limits dungeon design a lot. It limits enemy. There's no random encounters, so it limits that as an option for grinding. There are positives and negatives to it. But for like a continued aesthetic it goes for, it definitely delivers on it. I like a lot of the ideas. I don't know, it's clever in some situations. The concept, I guess, it's kind of like Crash Warped, where it's like we can have a bunch of different fucking like environments if we do time travel stuff. It's like, oh, it's pretty clever. It's also, it has like interesting takes on like the Ice Age, and obviously there's the Kingdom of Zeal or whatever there. It's like when it's like a little bit of a subversion, and like the future, it's going to be really cool, but actually it's really apocalyptic, and like other stuff like that, where we're going back to the dinosaur age, but people are there also, and they're fighting with the dinosaurs, and etc. etc. And it's not like a volcano that kills all the dinosaurs. It's lava is coming down. Isn't that crazy? But yeah, in the end, it didn't all come together for me in this mind-blowing experience. And I thought, generally, it doesn't stand... Like, is Chrono Trigger better than Final Fantasy 1 or Final Fantasy 2 to me? I don't know. I think I'd give them all like 4 stars. I think presentationally it's trying to do a lot more. And it probably achieves a lot more, and it's a lot more ambitious. But like, I don't know, there is an appeal to the Final Fantasy-ness of those games versus the sort of Dragon Ball-ness of this game. And I guess I might like the Final Fantasy aesthetic a little bit more. That might, like, I remember the crazy way that the Emperor looked at the end of Final Fantasy 2, and I'm like, this is cool. It might even be cooler than Lavos literally being Cell at the end. Though that was pretty cool. I don't know, I don't think the story is much more of a focus in Chrono Trigger. I don't know if it has anything that's like too exceptional though, and that's kind of like my biggest critique of the game, as we're going to get into. And like Final Fantasy 2 kind of did. Like everybody dying in Final Fantasy 2 was kind of cool. Like I remember at the beginning of that game, you like just get beaten and like the drug over to the thing. I feel like some of the like towns in Final Fantasy 2 are like cooler than some of the areas in Chrono Trigger, where you just go to a town. I honestly can't remember if this is Final Fantasy 1 or 2. It's been like 5 or 6 years since I played both of them. But you just get to like the like port city or whatever, and like they're all like weird, and I was like, oh, this is kind of crazy. I don't know. it didn't take an extra step to becoming a like, this is going to be a game that I talk with reverence about into the future. I feel like almost always when I talk about Chrono Trigger, it's going to be me on the negative end, and somebody's going to bring it up like they really love it, and I'll be like, shit was mid, fuck off. What I hope I'm going to say is that Final Fantasy VI is way better, because I still have hope for Final Fantasy VI. But I'm a little scared, because they talk about the games in tandem, and one of my complaints here is going to be that it's a little too corny and kiddie, as we can see here. And I was expecting it to be a little bit more mature, and I am expecting Final Fantasy VI to be a little bit more mature, but I'm kind of getting the impression that it's going to be more like Chrono Trigger than like a cooler game. I did get the impression that Final Fantasy VII was a little cooler and edgier, but we'll have to see. They just talk about that opera scene in Final Fantasy VI. It better be great. We'll get to it, though. Oh, I keep fucking up the thing. There are some harsh setbacks that stop it from becoming a truly great game to me. It's a little too corny and kiddie for my liking, or at least for what I expected with the reverence this game is spoken with. One of the greatest games of all time. I think its reputation betrays it in this way. I do definitely think it is like, it had large expectation from me. As I was saying, it's everything I should like. Everybody raves about the story and the characters. Ooh, this is going to be great. And it didn't stand out in story and character to me, really much at all, which we will kind of get into more. I repeat that line a few times in the PowerPoint. I think its reputation betrays it in this way. Betrays it, not portrays it. In almost every aspect, I think. I think, in the end, I just think Chrono Trigger is pretty overrated. And that was upsetting, I guess. I am disappointed in that. The core groups of characters is certainly a strength, but none of them are even on the shortlist of making the shortlist for my favorite characters ever. I literally did make like a shortlist for my favorite characters ever the other day, and I did have the thing of like, I just played Chrono Trigger, but man, none of these characters feel very interesting or unique or nuanced at all. They feel a little bit generic, if I say so. If I do say so myself. It's funny because they're like a merging of aesthetics. It's not that they feel like generic JRPG characters, but they do feel like generic Akira Toriyama characters in a sense. Marl is a lot like what the fuck was that happening outside? Something happened. Marl is a lot like Bulma, obviously. Like, you immediately see her and she looks just like young, early Dragon Ball Bulma. And she sort of she's not as naggy, but it is like, oh, this is kind of like an iteration on Bulma. And then Luca, I don't know who she reminds me of, but it's like the nerdy girl, like we've seen. Maybe it's Bulma split in two. The nerdy stuff is with Luca, and the cute, sexy stuff is with Marl over here. And then Chrono is a non-character, and then Robot is like, oh, okay, it's the robot thing. Robot's gonna become a man. This is great. Ayla's really cool, just because I really like that archetype of like dumb woman, strong woman. This is epic. And she's also really hot and is like a blonde Akira Toriyama character. So that's literally the hottest thing to ever exist. Look at Android 18. Who she looks a lot like. And then there's Magist, who is like, oh, he's like the bad guy turned good. And then Frog is like the tragic backstory guy. I don't really care too much about any of these characters. I will list them off in a different slide on which ones my favorite are. I am going to come off more negative than I think I truly am in this PowerPoint. But I was expecting like some great enthralling characters or something. And like, they were entertaining enough when they were around each other and speaking, but there's nothing like too interesting about any of them, I don't think. Or revolutionary or standout. They feel like competent, good characters for a competent, good story, but nothing more. Is kind of what I'm getting at. Also, their lack of impact on the plot outside of their introductory missions and the utter replaceability in most places is maybe the most disappointing thing about the game. Now, this is like a fundamental critique. Another thing that I understood of Chrono Trigger's reputation was that it had multiple endings, and it had like, I know this is a big thing of JRPGs and sort of post the ones that I played in Final Fantasies especially, is that there's a lot of optional characters you can pick up, and like things change depending on what you do with the optional characters and stuff. Chrono Trigger was touted as this is crazy. There's only, well, I guess you can option out Frog. And Magus, definitely, I think. Um, Now, when you arrive with characters, so basically you have a party of 3, and you can bring whichever characters you want. And then, like, when you arrive at a plot event, like, certain characters will have certain dialogue. But the dialogue is just, like, flavor text, like, personality character stuff. And it doesn't feel real. Like, first of all, the first critique is that, like, well, the first critique is a sort of a fundamental critique about, like, well, because there's different character like groups you can make, you can't. You would either have to write. It would be like 40 or 50 scenarios for each specific combination of characters, which would be like impossible. Um, for like if you take Frog and Marl and Chrono to verse Magus, this for it to be fully satisfying and live up to its potentiality here, they would have to have a different interaction with Magus than Chrono, Frog, and Luca, and Chrono, Frog, and Robo, and Marl and Luca and Chrono. And this is just kind of impossible to do, but they kind of attempt to do it in like having them have different like flavor text of like Frog will show up and reference his history with Magus. And like Marl would, if Frog wasn't there, Marl would step in to say, "You need to stop doing this, silly," or whatever. And it's like none of it feels like it feels like a lesser story because it's a game. It feels like in a show, like we would have a big confrontation here, a big emotional moment, but you can't because you don't know which characters the player is going to bring. And like if you don't bring Frog to that, then the emotional stuff is like way down. But you can not bring Frog to that mission. You need him to break it open at the beginning, but you can swap him out after that. And so it leads to the characters don't really feel like they have an impact, and it feels, and I was very aware the whole time that it doesn't really matter which characters you bring, and nothing interesting is going to happen depending on the characters you bring, besides like 1 or 2 lines of dialogue. And that is true throughout the whole game. Now, the PS1 version does have one difference, and that's that it adds like anime cutscenes that are like 4, maybe not 4 or 5, maybe like 10 to 15 seconds long, that are really pixelated and kind of look bad, and are very limitedly animated, but people definitely probably thought were impressive at the time. And the biggest like thing. Maybe you do have to bring Frog to the Magus fight because the opening cutscene is Frog walking up to Magus and all the lights turning on. But, like, there are a bunch of them where, like, there will be Chrono and 2 figures behind him in shadow because it doesn't matter who you bring to this. And it's like, that's like the biggest, it's like the PS1 has made the game worse because it, like, shows off that like whoever you bring is completely optional and unimportant to the actual plot. The plot just happens. It doesn't matter which characters you bring. It can sort of affect the characters differently, but you are not going to impact the plot by bringing different characters to different things in any like large meaningful way. It seems impossible to have a game like this. I don't know why people talk about Chrono Trigger like it does this. Like, I know this is like, people said that Mass Effect kind of did this, but then I know a big critique of Mass Effect 3 is that in the end it really doesn't matter, and like the ending is always going to be the same. And the Chrono Trigger endings are all the same. It's like you beat Lavos and you have a party, and depending on what happens, the party is a little different. But there's like a bad ending where you lose, but then you just reset anyway, where it's like the world basically ends. The world refused to change. It's kind of a neat little thing at the end. I'm not going to lie. But there's not like multiple endings where if you did this and you ignored this earlier, then like, I don't know, anything. Like, I can't even think of an alternative ending. Then like, Magus has to sacrifice himself at the end to kill Lavos or something. Or Chrono has to, or depending, like, one of your core characters dies depending on your decisions in the game. And this is another thing people talk about. People talk about the trial a lot, which is like the 3rd chapter of the game, where it sort of takes into account your behavior at the beginning in the fair, like whether or not you like ate this lunch that was on the table, or whatever. It's sort of like the beginnings of what would eventually become Undertale, where it's like actually taking your behavior into account. But like no matter what you do, even if you do it perfectly and you are found not guilty at the trial, you still go to prison and have to do that mission anyway. So there's no difference. And people talk about this like this is masterful, probably because when they were a kid, it like blew their minds when they got to this part and the game remembered anything at all. But the game remembers it and then does nothing with it. So it's like it feels like a massive like letdown. And people just talk about it with such reverence, like they're impressed. And I get that it might be because in 1995, when the game originally came out, nothing was like this. But that's not the way people talk about it. People go out of their way to say Chrono Trigger like is not dated at all. It feels modern and like it's aged like fine wine or whatever. These decisions are very like if these sorts of decisions were in a game today, there would be a massive critique that like it just falls flat because you don't actually do anything with your choice. You don't really have player agency, which I don't really care about. But it's kind of bad when like the game does something impressive, but is then like, but it doesn't matter. Off to prison with Chrono. And like even in that mission, I know if you like just wait in the jail cell, like Luke will come and break you out. Those things are kind of cute, but like you always end up in the same direction. And I thought there were many different directions to go in, so that's another big part of my disappointment, I think, with the game. But yes, this is all false impressions. This was all like somebody that comes into Chrono Trigger knowing nothing is going to have a very different experience to me who has all these expectations and preconceived notions that who knows how I got any of them. The multiple endings is a cool concept, but the fact that there is a real ending kind of lets me down as someone who has always been told how cool Chrono Trigger is for having multiple endings. It really doesn't have multiple endings at all. Its reputation betrays it. Oh my god, I repeated myself. Now this is where I give the haters right now some ammunition, which is how I think I definitely cucked my own experience in a sense. And basically two things happen here, which is guide and out of context. I think two very beneficial things for the game would be experiencing it in its context in 1995 or whatever. Because I think a lot of the visuals would have absolutely blown people's minds. I think they would have thought it was a massive step forward in like JRPG technology of you have the battles in the actual arena, you don't cut away to anything. It felt like a much realer JRPG. A lot of it was less abstract, was less gamified. And I think that would have been very impressive at the time. But now all these aspects still feel very gamified when we have like, I don't know, modern AAA games that look insane and stuff like that. And I'm assuming actual games where your consequences do matter and you can get different endings, etc., etc. Again, Mass Effect, and I think Baldur's Gate 3 is like that. I'm not sure. I think in 1990, and I think also being a kid playing this game would have make it have a much greater effect because you would have much more time. I don't have time, or I'm not going to I would rather drop it than do this, but basically, when you get lost, it probably is really rewarding to walk around for 45 minutes and then figure out, there was a hint that I should probably do this. Especially later in the game, and especially with the side quests where it's like, if I somehow figured out that you have to go on back in time and give that lady jerky, so in the future he'll give you the thing. If you spent like an hour wandering around the different time periods trying to figure out how you're supposed to progress in this side mission and you finally figure that out, it'd probably be a really cool moment. But I'm not going to do that. Instead, I have the guide up and I'm just looking through how you do all of these things and trigger everything. Guides are a whole nother like conversation of like, how much is this ruining the experience? It's certainly changing the experience, but everything changes the experience, right? I think I'll try. I feel like I played like the first two Final Fantasy games with minimal guides. I think I'll try and play Final Fantasy IV, which I think is the next one I'm going to do. It's either that or Earthbound, I think. Without guides. just out of the discovery fact, but I feel like I'm going to get lost enough if I'm like wandering around for like 5 minutes and I don't know what to do. It's either like I'm turning this off forever or I'm going to look up what to do. I did definitely become very, very, very reliant on the guide for like the second half of the game, where I was like reading it as I went constantly. And it did cuck some of the decision making towards the end of like, should I use a shelter here? When the guide will kind of tell you that you have another boss fight before you get to another save point, so I can figure out that yes, I should. So yes, I think these two things. I don't know. I feel like Chrono Trigger is designed to be a great game that you tinker with forever. Whereas, which is as a kid, like you're just roaming around and you're figuring out, oh my god, you can do different things, and oh my god, you can put Magus in the party if you do this, and oh my god, you can do this, and you can kill Magus the frog, and if you do that, then at the end he'll appear as a green-haired guy, and like if you go over here and you can make the forest come back, and like over here you can do this thingy, and like all of these little details would be like you can see fucking one of the sages way earlier or whatever. They're not even called sages. I'm thinking Jack and Daxter, but Melchior and the three guys, the other two. I forget the other two, but the one with the new and the future can like you can like see him if you go down through the sewer or whatever. And you can look at Death Peak and stuff like that. Discovery, I think. Like I feel like one of my favorite games ever is Yu-Gi-Oh! Capsule Monsters Coliseum, and I remember there was part of me that was like super disappointed after I finally beat that game for the first time, and I went back and basically it puts you into New Game Plus immediately with all your monsters, and then but you have to start the game again, and you go back to Joey, and it's like, man, you see Joey, you're like, is he gonna have like new monsters now? Is he gonna have like a flame swordsman? And it's the exact same battle that you did at the very start of your first playthrough, and it's like, well, this is really disappointing. I wish like this game like had an actual New Game Plus thing. And I'm not even comparing this to the actual New Game Plus thing that's in Chrono Trigger that I didn't really engage with. But like, basically it's the same game every time no matter what you do. You can change which monsters you use, which varies it up a lot. But as a kid, you would always imagine that with games. It's like, what if I could do something different this time? And you like have this like fake kid hope that like if you just will it hard enough, the game will change, even though the game's obviously pre-programmed, but you don't really understand that as a kid. Chrono Trigger would be a game, and I could like that wonderment if fucking Flame Swordsman was in Joey's fucking capsule, then that would have been one of the greatest gaming experiences of my life. So I imagine that was the case for a lot of kids with Chrono Trigger, where they got some of these different little things, and they found out little different things, and they found out about side quests, and they did it themselves, where they would be like, I had no idea you could go this. This could be something they discovered on their third playthrough that month or whatever, because you're fucking 11 and you have nothing else to do. But because of the way I sort of think about and consume things, it's like I just want to get the Chrono Trigger experience so I can talk about Chrono Trigger, so when people talk about Chrono Trigger, I can have a better reference for it. And I want to sort of highlight my positive feelings that I'm going to have of finishing the game and making progress, which is more than the... It might not be... You just can't know which one you would prefer, really. And it's like, do I really want to invest the time when, especially towards the end, and especially when I did all the side quests at the end, for like a month, was like, please, can Chrono Trigger be over? But yeah, I don't know. I played this game over a decent period of time. I think in the end, like, the in-game clock was like 23 hours, but I died a bunch of times, so it was probably close to like 25 or 26 hours. I know How Long to Beat says about 20 hours, but they're always under, I think, with everybody, so... Oh, we're a bit yawny. I watched a lot of YouTube videos where they talk with reverence about the locations and the surprises in the game that I really never felt the wonder. I guess the two moments where I felt the most... There's like 3 visual moments that stand out to me, but none of them had a super impactful punch. The biggest impactful moment was definitely when you first come out and you're in 2300 AD, where it's like the music and like the ash and the air and the different vibe and the post-apocalyptic imagery. You're like, okay, this is a really cool moment. Others that stand out is like... when you get to Magus's castle, there's a little cinematic cutscene when you first get there of like the towers. That's pretty cool. And what was the and the third one's the campfire moment. And the surrounding stuff around it, though, that stuff with Luca is kind of a little weird. And Luca isn't one of my favorites, so I didn't care too much. But yeah, I feel like that, like, people would say, and then you get to this great sewer section, and then you get to this great Death Peak section, and then you get to this great prehistoric section, and they're talking with wonder about all these moments that just didn't really affect me too much. And again, I think this might be because I'm out of the context of the time with this. I think the visuals are another thing I didn't entirely appreciate because of my lack of context, what other games look like at the time. This is a big thing because I assumed that all of the SNES RPGs basically looked like this, and they do not. So I remember this is only like a month ago, so I would have been like 3/4 through the game, and I was like getting excited of like, oh, I can start something new next. And I was looking up, and I saw footage of Final Fantasy IV, and I was like, oh my god, this looks like really dated and really ugly. And I was like, oh, it doesn't look like Chrono Trigger at all. And I'm like, oh, Final Fantasy VI will, though. And you put in Final Fantasy VI, and no, it doesn't. They're like, the longer sprites and everything, like, look really good. And it is, like, in both Final Fantasy games, they are the small, like, Final Fantasy 1 and 2 sprites. It's like, ooh, this does not nearly look as good. And I probably would have appreciated that more if I had done 4, 6, then Chrono Trigger, which is their release order. Or even 4, 5, 6 in Chrono Trigger. But yeah, I definitely assumed at least Final Fantasy VI was basically the exact same art style as Chrono Trigger. It is not. The text boxes in both of those, in the footage of Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy VI, look absolutely terrible. They're like colors and how big they are. It's not good. It'll make me miss Chrono Trigger, I'm pretty sure. But we're hoping that the story and the characters will pull us through and we'll love it. And the great Kefka and Terra and I don't know. I could probably think of more names if I recalled things. I guess another big spoiler that's always stayed with me, spoilers for Final Fantasy VI, I guess, is that Kefka like destroys the world halfway through, and then you do the whole thing. You fight a train as you run away from it. That's pretty cool. In the intro, you know, they're in those machines and they're running towards you. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh, how other games look at the time. So yes, obviously Chrono Trigger would be immediately like, oh my god, look at this, if you were in the context. Which is probably where a lot of the positive vibes come from, I'm guessing. I used to a guide, and the way I play games, I think, undermines some of the surprises and the rewards for exploration. We already talked about this. I don't know when I started using a guide. I think it might have been as early as the Shrine in 600 AD. That I think that is true, where I was like, I can't figure out where I'm going. And I went to the Shrine, but then I couldn't figure out that you had to play the fucking shitty organ. And I think you have to go back and then back and forth or something. I think figuring out where to go and how to influence things by messing with the game timeously, as a kid, it's an unintentional pun there, with a lot of free time would be absolutely add to the experience, or playing it over and over again and realizing there's different endings. The problem with this is I doubt modern gamers have much time or patience for this. That would be me. I am the modern gamer. Now we can move into characters. I feel like I've said a lot of what I wanted to say outside of the smaller details, so the rest of this should be relatively quick. People do not stop talking about... Hold on, I just want to make sure I'm recording. Okay, we are. I just, sometimes it's happened before where we haven't been recording and you're like, man, I don't want to repeat all that stuff. People do not stop talking about the characters in Chrono Trigger, but to me, they are good but not great. My favorites were the girls. Big shocker. Everybody's shocked right now. Ma was number 1, Ayla was number 2, Luca was number 3, I guess. I don't know if I like Luca very much. Then it's probably followed by Magus, Frog, Robo, and then Chrono, who's our silent protagonist. I don't know how I feel about that choice either. I guess this is just a fundamental way I engage with RPGs and most games where I'm like, I want the intended experience, not my own experience. And that definitely highlights the games I like, right? That's why I like linear third-person Naughty Dog games, because there's no player agency. You're just playing through a story, gameplay and story basically separated. They do mesh over, but in terms of concepts and worlds, they are separated. And so with RPGs, whenever like the splash screen comes up to name somebody, I'm like, this is disgusting. Get this out of here. I'm not calling Chrono Kyle. That's retarded. I do that in Pokemon games, but that's because that literally has no story. And even when I'm playing like XD, I'll usually play as Wes. And I think Michael when I play Colosseum is Wes. XD I might call it Kyle, but whatever. What was that? Oh yeah, so there's definitely an engagement with these games of like the fact that that's even an option shows that there is definitely a different way to engage with this, where you want to do like you want to express yourself in the game. I've really never understood this with games at all. Like people will be like, I had this role playing thing that I did in a game in Pokemon, and like I only chose this type of Pokemon so I could imagine myself in it. I have no imagination when it comes to games. I want the game to have the imagination and for me to intake the information. I hate character creators in games. I don't really like it. In Pokemon, I'll put the cool suit on. It's probably like black pants and something. That's okay. An outfit's okay. But if I'm like, and I have to do this and I have to create this character, like it always just looks like me. Or it's a girl. Because, in Pokemon you do play as the girls a lot because they do have cooler character designs. But then I just call him Kyle anyway and we can pretend it's Kylie. Anyway, so I guess that was about how the name pop-ups stuff. It's also weird when like Magus's name pops up and you can change it, even though you've been playing the whole game as him, as Magus or Janice. I guess you could name him Janice, and I know some people name Frog Glenn, and that's like, oh, it's like a little cute thing. Or you could name Marl Nadia. Now I know in some RPGs, if you do that, they have like funny interactions or something. I wonder if Marl like tells you to fuck off if you try to call her Nadia. That would be cute. But I don't like that like imprinting yourself in the game, which I know RPGs a lot of the time about that. So there were some emotional moments of investment when Marl's father is being annoyed. I wanted the option to kill him. True, I was emotionally invested then. I was hating that king and that chancellor. Even if her arc was sadly about forgiving him, true. Ayla and Kronos flirting was cool. That was great. They should have ended up together. But the PlayStation has a little fucking... it has, like, sequel cutscenes at the end that I guess aren't in the game, where it's like Luca finds a baby in the woods, and, like, Chrono and Marl get married, and, like, Ayla and Kino get married, which is... I think they say that in the game. I thought Kino was a girl, so that came as a bit of a surprise. But that was funny. When Robo got beat up by those other robots, that shit was crazy. Absolutely true. You're like, this poor Robo, he's literally getting Joel right now. I feel like I'm watching Joel get murdered again for the first time when the great Robo is getting beaten up. Even though Robo is kind of boring, I don't really care about Robo. But none of the Magus or Frog stuff really got to me as much as people seem to talk about it getting to them. And yeah, none of these, like... I'm not really going to be thinking about these characters too much, I don't think. I'm going to be like, man, Marl, she was pretty cute. Ayla, she was pretty cool. The rest of them, I don't know. Remember Magus? He was a bad guy and then he was a good guy. That was crazy. Frog, he used to be a guy. Imagine that. But I'm not going to be sitting here like I'm thinking about Black Sails characters being like, man, that was the fucking greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. Because these characters were, they were good. Kind of middling. A lot of the characterization was very generic and by the numbers too. To me, outside of the straightforward emotionality, no moment had me consider or love any character, I guess, outside of Marl being cheeky at times, which I really enjoyed. Like, I don't really care that, like, the characters don't really interact outside of, like, main story beats where they know which characters are going to be where. So it's like you don't really bond as them as a group too much. Like, there's not much characterization outside of, like, must-save world. And they interact with their individual side characters a little bit. Like, none of it felt like it was... I guess, in a great damnation of Chrono Trigger, I guess most of the characterization felt like generic shonen characterization. But, like, less, because it's, like, fragmented and you never know which characters are where. It feels silly like that. It feels childish like that. and it feels basic like that, I guess. I don't know. None of the characters ever said anything where I was like, oh, that's interesting. And none of the characters really did anything, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Didn't expect that character to do that. They're all like very much going for what they're going for, and they do it relatively well. But I've also seen all this, I feel like, in a million other characters before. There's not a lot of uniqueness, I guess I'm saying. Characters slide 2. I do like Lavos as a villain. The cracking of his shell to reveal literal Cell was pretty cool. You get in there, the second form literally looks like imperfect Cell. It's crazy. There's a few Dragon Ball things like that, like obviously the dinosaurs and the humans interacting at the same time. There's like the Dragon Ball aesthetic of being like merging old and new technology of like in 1080 they have fridges and stoves and stuff. And there's also like monsters running around and medieval knights. It's like a very Dragon Ball thing that in Dragon Ball they're sort of like in the future with like Capsule Corp and stuff like that. There's also like T-Rexes running around. And like, but then they have guns and there's like a modern military and stuff with the Red Ribbon Army. It's just like cool. And there's aliens in Dragon Ball Z, and it all fits into this like one aesthetic, and Chrono Trigger shares that aesthetic, so it's pretty cool. There's also like one of the main songs just sounds like the DBZ song, where it's like it's like the cheer up Dragon Ball Z song, but just slightly different. Though we'll talk about the music more in the next slide, I think. Then the more abstract alien-looking third form was really cool. I did like that, and the fact that like the little one on the side is the actual body rather than the thing you would assume was the body because it's an alien. It's weird. Also, it screams when you kill it, and that's kind of crazy and cool. But outside of this, he doesn't really have any characterization due to the type of calamity villain he is. True, it's not like there's a great villain that we stand across from. I'm hoping somebody like Kefka or... Is Cecil the main character or the bad guy in Final Fantasy IV? I know you go to the moon in that game. Crazy. Or Sephiroth in Final Fantasy VII. Anyway, I know they both end up becoming gods at the end anyway, but different story. Sephiroth fucks with, I nearly called him Spike. Cloud, I know. I have no idea what Kefka's, like, relationship to any of the actual characters are. And, you know, I'm a little fearful that, like, he probably doesn't have any, and he's just, like, a cool guy in cutscenes sometimes, and then there's not much story there. But, I don't know. I'm scared. I hope Final Fantasy VI is good. Better than Chrono Trigger. I want that to be a 5 out of 5 game, damn it. Never in my life did I suspect that I'd be, like, a Final Fantasy VII tard, where I would probably think that one was the best. But I don't know. I feel like there might be some cool stuff in that. It's from like the PS1 generation. Video games were adult now. They weren't dumb shonen stuff like with Final Fantasy VI maybe. I don't know. Maybe Final Fantasy X. Now that's a little bit more of an edgy opinion I can get behind. As long as I just don't like Final Fantasy VII the best, which I'm kind of my intuition is leading me towards. Some other villains do have characterization, but they're either evil or comedically incompetently evil, which is fine. But it didn't stand out to me. Ozzy, which is like Magus' like right hand man. He's very incompetently comedically evil. The big dinos are very evil, and the Chancellor and especially Zeal, though her form stuff was cool too, was pretty fucking evil. Dalton Virgin almost being interesting, but then was just a bad guy anyway. True, he was like a really bad guy when I thought he was maybe going to be like a rogue guy. When you first meet him at the ship and he doesn't attack you. The Dino Boss guy had a cool moment of realization before he died that was cool. That was probably the coolest thing a villain did, where it's like, man, the Dinos fought to the end, even if we're dying right now. And fucking here comes Lavos. And it's like, man, what a great guy. That Asla or whatever his name was. Probably the most interesting villain. I guess outside of Magus, if you count Magus. Outside of this, it didn't really feel too different to the other RPGs I've played, which are really just Final Fantasy 1 and 2 in terms of character writing. I'm hoping Final Fantasy 6 blows me away. True, we've already talked about all of that stuff. And I think my last slide here is about the music, and I also didn't think the music was that great, so oh my goodness. The music is another mercilessly praised thing about the game, and I'm not going to sit here and say that it's not good or anything like that, but all the core tracks besides the title screen track are overplayed so much throughout the game that right now, having just finished it, I do not have a deep appreciation or lust to listen to them again ever. I think there's a potentiality that I'll have some random OST playlist in the background playing in the near future, and one of the songs will come on and it'll hit me, but as of now, I'm not too in love with the music either. And then bringing up the DBZ song I already talked about. This is true. Like the bum 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 bum. That's the Pokemon one. But it kind of sounds like that. I can't do sounds. I can't do the noises and recall it at the same. See, it just goes right into the Pokemon one. The title track is like the best track. Like the crazy, I don't even know what instrument it is that comes in with the. You're like, you sit the fuck up. You're like, this is Chrono Trigger. This is the greatest video game of all time. But then all the other tracks, like, they're in YouTube videos so much, they're like, I don't know, I'm just overexposed to them, I think. And I'm like, I don't want to hear these songs again for a little while. If I were a betting man, I would say that I would grow to appreciate them a lot more when I put some distance between me and the game. I guess I can say that they're all very memorable. Like, I don't know if I really remember a lot of Final Fantasy 1 or 2 tracks. Obviously, there's the Final Fantasy song. I can't do songs right now. But that was me humming the Final Fantasy theme. What was I saying? But I'm sure if I put, like, the playlist of those first 2 games on, I'd be like, oh, remember this one? This one was crazy. But I think I definitely remember a lot more of the Chrono Trigger song. I feel like you play any Chrono Trigger song from the soundtrack and I'd be like, yep, I recognize that. And usually I'm pretty bad with music, and I don't recognize music that often. We had those big jokes when we were doing the Villain Saga thing where I'm like, I do not recall a single, and I still maintain to this day, I do not recall a single Villain Saga OST. I can't even pretend to hum one of them. But people really like that OST track, so... that is the Chrono Trigger review. I guess the only, like, did we talk about the environments and stuff and the different enemy types? Not really. I think they're all pretty cool. Zeal, it's like a floating kingdom, bro. It's crazy. And there's the Ice Age down there, and then there's, like, Dinosaur Paradise and, like, prehistoric stuff. And then, you know, there's a bunch of medieval stuff. And then there's, like, this fire palace. And then there's a unique aesthetic to all the, like, the Zeal, like, stuff where it's like technology but it's also like weird and old, and then Magus has like cool imagery in his crazy place, and there's different towns and stuff, and you know there's a monster town. Isn't that crazy? And you know you come out of a closet there. That's pretty funny and cool. I don't know, I guess that's all I really have to say about Chrono Trigger right now. I don't know. I also think if I put some distance between me and the game, I could like it more. I guess I didn't really say, but throughout most of the game, it was like Chrono, Marl, and then Ayla, and then Luca, like, and Magus. Those were like the 3. I very seldomly used Frog and Robo. I did use each representative character, obviously, in their side mission at the end of the game, so it gave me a little bit of a taste. Like, I didn't have any... I had one triple tech unlocked, and it was Marl, Luca, and Chrono, but I maybe used it once, and outside of that, I never used it again. So I didn't unlock, like, a bunch of the triple techs. I watched a video of all the endings, and saw that they were all boring. So yeah, I should watch a YouTube video showing off all the triple techs. That'd be pretty cool. But I think I've seen a lot of them in the YouTube videos I've been watching. There's a lot of mechanics I just didn't really delve into. Like, I don't really know how Robo or Frog really plays. I know, like, Frog can heal. I never got to any of his healing techs or whatever. Well, I guess there's, like, Slurp at the very beginning that you can heal with. So yeah, also I know that, like, Ayla has this whole, like, charming technique she can do that the guide is telling me that I should make sure to do it every turn, but because I really didn't use her much towards the back end of the game, I never did any of the charming stuff. Most of the time I was all out attack. That's what we love around here. That's how I play fucking Pokemon most of the time too. Swords Dance, we don't need that shit. Substitute, we don't need that shit. Just give me Flamethrower, Fire Blast, Overheat, and Blast Burn, brother. Let's run through this Elite Four. Anyway, I think that really is all we have to say about the great Chrono Trigger that maybe wasn't so great. If people watch this, this will be a fiery one. So maybe I'm hoping this one doesn't get too many views. That being said, that's it. Support links in the description below. Thanks.